She married him on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, she wasn't sure if she'd made the worst mistake of her life or the only smart decision she'd ever made. The winter of 1887 came down on the Wyoming territory like something with a grudge. It didn't snow so much as it buried. It didn't blow so much as it pressed. And when it finally settled over the valley between the Laramie Mountains and the edge of nowhere, it had a particular interest in a young woman named Clara Hobbs, who was standing alone on the porch of a dead man's cabin with 30 cents, a half-empty sack of flour, and no idea how she was going to see March. Her husband had been dead 11 days. Not the new one, the first one. Thomas Hobbs had been a kind man, mostly. Quiet and slow in the way that some men are when they've made peace with their station in life. He'd brought Clara west from Missouri 3 years prior with a second-hand wagon and a first-hand belief that a man could build something out here if he worked hard enough. He worked hard. He built something. And then a horse kicked him in the chest on a November morning, and by evening he was gone, and Clara was left with a cabin that leaked, a woodpile that wouldn't last 6 weeks, and the kind of silence that makes a person talk to themselves just to remember what words feel like. She'd been managing. That's what she told herself. She was managing. She was careful with the flour, careful with the wood, careful with the single candle she let herself burn each night. But managing and surviving are two different things, and the cold knew the difference, even if Clara was trying not to think about it. It was old Wren Whitaker who said it first, plainly and without apology, the way only old men who've watched enough winters can speak. He'd ridden up from the low settlement 12 miles south to check on her, which is to say, he'd ridden up to confirm his suspicions. And when she opened the door and he saw the blue tinge around her lips and the way she was holding her own arms, like she was trying to hold herself together, he just took off his hat and said, "Clara, you ain't gonna make it alone." She wanted to argue. She had the words ready, but the cold came through the open door and took them right out of her mouth. "There's a man," Wren said. "Name's Callum Roe. Came through here last spring, bought old Decker's place up the North Ridge. Got a real house up there. Stone walls, deep fireplace. A root cellar still got food in it. He's alone, too." Clara stared at him. "He'd have to agree," Wren said. "And you'd have to agree. And neither one of you'd have to like it. But you'd both be alive come April." She thought about it for exactly one night. One long, unbearable, freezing night where the wind found every crack in the cabin walls, and she lay under every blanket she owned and still couldn't stop shaking. By morning, she'd made her decision, not because she was brave, because she was cold. Callum Roe met her at the base of the North Ridge Trail on a gray Thursday morning with snow coming sideways and a face that gave away nothing. He was taller than she'd expected, broader. He had dark eyes set under a heavy brow and a jaw that looked like it had been cut from the same rock as the mountains behind him. He shook her hand like she was a man doing business, which she supposed was exactly what this was. The preacher from the settlement came up on a borrowed mule, said the words fast with his coat pulled over his ears, and he was done. No flowers, no music, no one cried. Callum signed the paper, Clara signed the paper, and then they rode up the ridge together in silence while the snow filled in, their tracks behind them like it was trying to erase the whole thing. She didn't know him. He didn't know her. And somewhere between the vows and the summit of that ridge, it occurred to Clara that she had just handed her life to a complete stranger. The house was, as promised, solid. Stone walls a foot thick. A fireplace big enough to stand in. Real glass in the windows, not oilcloth. Clara walked through the 2 rooms slowly, touching the walls, noting the supplies on the shelves, reading the small details of a man's private life the way you read a letter left open on a table. There was a Bible with a cracked spine, a photograph nailed to the wall near the window, face down, a rifle above the door so clean it caught the firelight, and everywhere, in every corner, the particular kind of quiet that belongs to a man who has chosen to live without company for a long time. Callum brought in her things from the wagon, all of them, without being asked. He didn't speak while he did it. He set each bundle down carefully, like it mattered, and then he built up the fire and said, "You take the room. I'll sleep out here." That was the whole conversation. She stood at the bedroom door for a moment, then nodded, then went in and sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hands flat on the quilt and thought, well, here I am. If you're feeling this story, go ahead and subscribe to Saddleback Soul Stories. Stories like this stay with you. The first week was just survival, wearing the face of routine. Clara cooked. Callum cut wood. She melted snow for water. He checked the horses and the roof and the places where cold could get in. They moved around each other in the small space with the careful precision of two people who had silently agreed not to take up too much room. They were polite. They were not warm. She noticed things about him the way you notice things when silence gives you no choice. He rose before dawn without an alarm, and she never once heard him complain. Not about the cold, not about the work, not about the sudden presence of a woman in his house. He ate what she cooked without comment, but also without waste. He had a habit of stopping whatever he was doing at dusk and standing at the window for a few minutes, just looking out at the ridge, like he was checking for something. She didn't ask what. She wasn't giving much away either, to be fair. There were things about Clara Hobbs that old Wren Whitaker didn't know. Things that the settlement didn't know. Things that had ridden west with her from Missouri, tucked under a false bottom of a wagon, and wrapped in 3 years of silence, in a first husband who had been kind enough, or perhaps wise enough, never to ask. Her last name hadn't always been Hobbs. That was the smallest of the secrets, but it was the doorway to all the others. On the 9th day, a storm came down from the north that made the previous weeks look polite. It came fast and mean, the way the worst ones do, with no build-up and no mercy. Callum got the horses secured and the extra wood brought in before it fully broke, and then they were sealed in together, the fire burning hard, the wind screaming at the stone walls like it was personally offended by them. They were closer to each other that first storm night than they've been at any point since the wedding. Not by choice exactly, but the house had only so much warmth, and it gathered at the center, near the fire, and so did they. Clara sat on the low stool to the right of the hearth, mending a seam on one of her dresses. Callum sat to the left, working grease into his saddle leather with slow, deliberate strokes.